Hi viewers, in this video we will dive into the movie The Old Guard. We will discuss the movie story, summarize the plot, and explore the cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie production details and box office performance. Finally, we will share the review and personal reactions of the movie. So let's begin with the movie story. The film starts with four people laying on the ground, ratted with bullets. We hear the voice of Andromich the Scythian or Andy, played by Charlize Theron, saying how tired she is of all this. Sometime earlier, Andy meets with one of her partner, Broker, in Morocco. They join their other partner, Joe and Nikki. The four of them are immortal assassins who have lived for centuries. They are so devoted to staying hidden that Andy must discreetly erase a picture that a group of women took that she is seen in. They are set to meet with an ex-CIA operative, James Copley, who talks them with catching a militia responsible for terrorizing locals with kidnapping and violence. The team expects the mission and is flown to South Sudan. As they gear up and enter the base, they quickly realize they were set up before the militia in question steps out to mow them all down with bullets, leading to the intro scene. The four lay bleeding until their powers allow them to push the bullets out and heal quickly. The militia is surprised but have little time to react further as the team starts killing them, with Andy wielding her axe against the marks. They spot a camera and figure that Copley had set it up to expose their secret, and destroys the camera, and the four escapes and resolve to stick together to find Copley. In Afghanistan, a team of US Marines head into a base to rescue women who are being held captive by a terrorist leader. Niall Freeman leads the team in, and one of the women directs her to the target. Niall and her partner head in and shoot at the target. She tries to stop his bleeding to take him in alive, but he grabs a knife and slashes her throat. Niall's partner Dizzy goes to tend to her wound as Niall appears to lose consciousness. As this happens, the four assassins experience the same vision of Niall together, realizing that there is another like them that is out there. They change course and head to find her. In the medical tent, Niall's neck wound has completely healed to the surprise of Dizzy and the other Marines. In London, Copley attends a presentation from his employer, Merrick, who wants to have his company. Merrick Pharmaceuticals potentially save millions of lives with their innovations. Copley shows Merrick the footage of the assassins after the mission, and while he is impressed, Merrick wants hard physical proof for his experiments. Niall is alienated by her teammates after the incidents, and she is told she is to be sent to Germany for more tests despite her objections. Before she is taken, Andy inspects her and knocked out the other soldier before taking Niall with her. On the drive, Niall tries to escape and Andy steps out to shoot her in the head. Up until this point, Niall thought she might have been dreaming, but now she realized that she really cannot die. They make it to a airbase where a pilot takes them to France. After Andy falls asleep, she finds that Niall tied her arm to the plane and is trying to force her and the pilot and gunpowder to land the plane. Andy shoots the pilot and orders Niall to free her so that she can fly the plane, but it turns out to have just been a trick to get free. As the pilot was just playing dead, Andy subdues Niall and forces her to continue going along with their mission. Andy and Niall arrive at their hideout to meet the other guys. Niall is told what their team does and how their powers work, as well as the fact that they have lived through and even been involved in countless historical events. Andy explained that they can eventually die, but they never know when it could happen or why, how it does, or as they lost a fellow immortal warrior centuries earlier after his wounds never healed. At night, Niall wakes up Settle after telling the guy she saw a vision of a woman trapped in an iron coffin, screaming and thrashing about. Booker tells her that the woman was a former partner of theirs, Kuina, who was the first of the immortals that Andy found. They were great friends and partners until they were captured and continuously killed by people who thought they were inhuman. Queen was forced into the iron coffin and thrown into the sea, where she remained trapped for 500 years, doomed to continue drowning with no chance of escape, and Nile was able to feel all of her pain. Andy and Nile arrive at the hideout as I told. So later on, the hideout is attacked by some merc working for Merrick. Booker is anticipated with a grenade and his wound take longer to heal. While Joe and Nick are captured, Andy finds some of the men and kills them before she escapes with Nile and Booker. She is wounded and finds that she is taking longer to heal. The Milks taunt Joe and Nikki as they try to separate them. When one of them mockingly asks Joe if Nikki is his boyfriend, he asks an impression speech about how Nikki is way more than that. They kiss before the goons pull them apart. They are taken to Merrick, where Joe headbutt him. He realized by trying to see proof of their immortality by repeatedly stabbing Joe. Merrick has Joe and Nikki taken to the lab while still demanding that the other immortals be found. Andy, Nile, and Booker stop at an abandoned mine where some of their belongings are. Andy fears that they might be tracked after she was wounded by one of the men back at the hideout. As they plan their next move, Nile continues to have questions about her newfound destiny. She is more reluctant to go along after Booker says that he has already outlived all of his children. Nile thinks about her own mother and brother and how they had to mourn her father when he was killed in action. Addie goes to a nearby pharmacy to have her wound tended to. Later, as they proceed to carry on their mission, Nile decided to back out and spend whatever time she has left with her family, and Andy lets her go. However, Nile later finds a gun clip in the trunk of the car, realizing Booker intentionally gave Andy an empty gun. Andy and Booker track down Copley and move in to get him, but Booker reveals his alliance with Copley and shoots Andy in the back. He justifies his betrayal by saying that Merrick may have found a way to end their immortality so that they can die peacefully. Booker then noticed that Andy is still not healing as quick as she was. Merrick has his men take her and Booker to join Joe and Nikki, fully intent on potentially killing them, all if it is mean he has found his breakthrough. After Joe and Nikki finds out about Booker's deception, they turn on him as well. Nile finds Copley and forces him to help her rescue the others, but he is more than willing after seeing what kind of man Merrick really is. Copley had been gathering information on the exploit and heroic that the Immortals has performed throughout the centuries. They make it to Merrick's building and kill his men before freeing the Immortals. Instead of fleeing, Andy opts to stop Merrick then and here to prevent him from hunting them any further. After killing another slew of mercenaries, Merrick finds Andy and Nile. After he attacks, Andy jams her axe into his neck, and as he tries to shoot her, Nile tackles him out to the window and they both land on a car. Nile heals up while Merrick is a dead bloody mess. The team then leaves together and Andy's wound eventually heals. Copley helps set up Nile's situation as being killed in action, meaning her family will have to mourn her as they did her father. Meanwhile, the other immortals force Booker into a century long exile for his betrayal and he bids them farewell. The others decide to continue working with Copley as long as he can help them stay hidden. 6 months later, Booker drunkenly returns to his apartment in Paris. He is greeted by a very unexpected visitor, Cohen. Just as Ryan Coogler crafted Black Panther as an entry in his old dictatorial universe, Gina Prince-Bythewood cast her Netflix superhero film, The Old Guard, in her own stylistic image. The director of Love and Basketball, The Secret Life of Bees and Beyond the Lights. Enjoy a scene where her character gets all up in their feelings and she invites you to climb in there with him. These are some introspective characters, a byproduct of their having lived for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. Several times, the camera lingers on their faces as they contemplate or remember the sadness of losing someone. The film sits patiently with these moments, putting the same level of importance on the characters and their emotions as it does on the action. A scene of Andy sorting a piece of balaclava carries the same weight as a scene of her cleaving a foe with a gigantic battle axe. Andy is the eldest member of an elite band of people who appeared to be immortal. The opening scene featured a flash forward to their bullet ridden bodies. A little later, we see them rising up fully healed after his slaughter, spitting out the bullets that have penetrated their faces as they move down their opponents. This squad of four is about to be joined by a fifth member, Nile, a marine station in Afghanistan whose slit throat suddenly heals itself. She is also plagued by nightmarish vision of other team members, a pathetic link that, according to Booker, only shuts down once they have all met. Until Nile showed up, Booker was the Guard's youngest member, joining in 1812. Since Mad Max Fury Road commented Theron's ability to wield her Oscar-winning acting skill into the bodies of fierce warrior who kicks ass, the old guard treats us to be a great plain bond fight between Nile and Andy. The two showcase their battle credential while Andy offers gruesome example of Nile's ability to heal, with Nile's braided, naturally hairdo and Andy's Karen-style coif. Their battle plays like an unintentional and vengeful commentary on those angry. Can I speak to a manager videos blogging social media? What does feel international? However, it's the inclusivity inherited in the description of the immortals, both in flashbacks and in its current timeline. They are played by a variety of different races and it never once feels forced or pandering. In addition to observing the humanity of its heroes, the old guard also employs Prince Bathwood's penchant for grandiose, melodramatic gestures that should not work at all yet play out masterfully. Think about Noni on that balcony in the Beyond of the Light, or Monica setting the terms of the climactic game in Love and Basketball. Here, the moment occurs between Andy's teammates Nicola and Joy by virtue of their shared immortality. These men have been together for hundreds of years. They are lovers whose meet cute occurred when they were constantly killing each other during the Crusades. After they have been captured by minions of our villain, the evil Fermadacial to Darobic Merrick, Joy's concern for his falling comrade is mocked with the homeopathic intent. Is he your boyfriend? His captor asks. Joy responds with a declaration of love as shamelessly florid as it is heartfelt, putting that paltry moment of LBTQ representation in Avenger Endgame to show. Writer Gek Roka, who adapted the graphic novel, he wrote that Landro Fernandez hits all the standard story beats of his gender. That's the obvious exposition to the immortality role. An over the top villain, the villain's conflicted right hand man, a very sad backstory of torment for Andy, a betrayal, a climactic rescue mission, and even a scene that sets up the sequel. But he and Prince Bethford always sport these familiarities with their actors' ability to depict how strongly bound together their characters are. There are numerous scenes where people just talk to each other, either to get exposition out of the way or to propel the story forward. And every time we come away feeling as if we know these people. So when the torture filled middle portion kicks in, there is genuine concern for our heroes. These scenes force us to question the terror of being committed to a lifeline of gruesome medical experiments simple because you cannot shuffle off this mortal coil. Third, it contains more dramatic sequence than most superhero movies. The old guard doesn't scamp on the good old-fashioned violence. Combat scenes are filmed so now you can who is doing what and edited together for maximum carnage and effect by Prince-Bythewood's usual editor, Triley Staffrey. Staffrey is a favorite of director like Cassie Lemons and as seen in her work in the first episode of Ava Darnay When They See Us. She is very good at alternating between anime drama and the much wider scope of action, keeping both speeds in balance. The cinematography by Barry Aykroyd and Tammy Reich is also quite good. Their sequences night and inside rooms have the same richness as their brightly lit outdoor shoots of France and the desert. The old guard has the benefits of not carrying the script fan driven baggage of the Marvel and DC movies. As a result, it may not get the attention it deserves, but this is an excellent example of what this type of film can be. One I hope will be studied by the much bigger budgeted tackles you know and love. I cannot remember the last time I was actually pumped to see a sequel based on a post credit teaser. To be honest, I never know what the hell is going on in most of them, but this is one made me wish Netflix had switched me immediately to the next installment as the credit rolled. The review of the movie. Who wants to live forever? Not Charlize Theron, evidently. Playing immortal warrior and the leader of a covert band of unkillable mercenaries, Theron spent almost as much time as battling many centuries worth of accumulated eggs as she does slicing and dicing entire battalion of attackers. Armed with Annie and an ancient ox, Theron brings a layer of complexity to a role that is otherwise largely defined through exemplary fight choreography. Gina Prince-Bythewood crisp, efficient direction of his adaptation of an action fantasy comic book series by Grip Roca served the physical element of the performance well. A fight on rattling cargo plane between Theron and KiKi Layne, playing Nile, a reluctant new recruit to the Immortal Club, is a blast. Even Andy cracks a smile at one point. She stabbed me. Theron's character later tells her right hand man, Booker, I think she has potential. Where the film is less well spotted is in the screenplay, which Roca himself adapted and which gets backed on in some decidedly moody character motivation at a crucial point. Equally tone deaf is a score that sidesteps the timelessness of the central characters, feeling more disposable than eternal. Still, there's a plenty to enjoy, not least lazy traffic turn as the newbie with a fresh take on Forever. The movie The Old Guard is a smart blend of action and emotions. KiKi Layne, Luca Marinelli, Charlize Theron, and Marwan Kenzari are part of the Old Guard in Netflix film of the same name. Netflix is the production of this film. There's a moment in the wonderful 2000 romance Love and Basketball when Monica and Gwen see college sweetheart who are both athletes sit in a dorm room bed together recovering from their brushes. Their bodies are tangled and facing in opposite direction with her hand holding ice on their belly and is holding ice on her ankle. The camera looks at the little drop of the water as on his skin and on hers. The movie The Old Guard. Sometime 10 years ago, I reviewed Netflix Extraction proclaiming it was a decent film and all we were really getting in terms of big bombastic action. That was enough. Since then we have had even favorite action film grace us as a movie have been pushed further and further back due to COVID-19. So it was exciting that Netflix is dropping another movie in the genre, The Old Guard. Well, it was exciting until I watched it. The Old Guard really puts to test the old saying that bigger cannot be chooser or that something is better than nothing. With a cool concept based on an intrigued comic book and an action star like Charlize Theron is in the lead, it should be so much more than it is. Instead, we get a movie that seemed like it was made by the old guard of Hollywood, focus on checking boxes instead of entertaining. The old guard concept is rife with intriguing ideas. There's a small group of four people of cannot die. Shoot them, we hate them, whatever, they will just come back right in front of you with their wounds completely healed. Eventually, however, their wounds stop healing. They are not sure why or how long it will take, but at some point they do die. Andy, the oldest of the immortal, leads this team comprised of Booker, Joe, and Nikki. The group fights evil throughout the centuries doing what they deem to be best of humanity. However, things get shaken up when Nile, a marine in Afghanistan, gets her throat slit and lives, discovering she is the next immortal. The team scoops her up just as a Copley, an ex-CIA agent, brings to hunt them down in order to capture them for the CEO of the pharmaceutical Merrick company that wants to harvest their DNA to save humanity. That, of course, is a total lie. Merrick is a greedy man who wants to live forever and also sadistic. And that is really where the film fails to hold together. The concept of these night immortal people living among us is very cool and could be executed in a lot of interesting ways. The movie, however, deal mostly in tropes, which is okay if you are trying to be big and bums, but the film is not. Merrick is partly evil in an almost compy way, but the movie treats him seriously. Copley is the great character for the film, but his motivation feels forced. His character development never truly concepts and often feels like it's checking boxes. The student and teacher fight. The immortal couple stays together. The grumpy guy is grumpy about living forever. The film spends extensive time on these characters, but it cannot make them click on the whole because everything is too based by numbers. The only true relationship is between Andy and Niall, and even then, it can feel forced at times. Theron and Lane bounce off each other wonderfully, and when the characters are not being forced into expositional dialogue, they work well. It's just as so much of the film is that dialogue. It doesn't help that the plot seems to hop from one moment to another instead of flowing as a cohesive whole. Director Gina Prince-Bythewood Beverly takes her time with the film, setting up characters with long pauses between action sequences. But neither aspect ever feels good enough to hold up the entire film. Her action direction is strong, aside by Theron's ability to pull off the most of the fight herself. She knows where the camera should be, doesn't cut much, and keeps things lit, but it constantly acclaimed by music tracks that make it feel like we are in a low budget TV show. The action set pieces all feel small scale as if there is a little weight to them. The old guard wants to be a franchise about as desperately as Netflix 6 Underground does too. Much like that film which more it articulately on its sleeve, the old con often feels like it is setting up the future instead of playing in the present film. It ends on a moment that feels more like the conclusion to a TV pilot than a movie, and it's often distracted by its future possibilities. The old car does not hold together enough to make you want more of it, and so its constant sequel betting stands out even more. Maybe it's already time for a new card to come in. The Old Guard movie review. Gina Prince-Bythewood delivered the best Netflix action movie yet. Watching Gina Prince-Bythewood new movie The Old Guard, I was reminded of another Netflix fictional last December, 6 Underground. Both film involved a covert group of mercenaries who lived off the grid, but Versus Michael movie was total fucking garbage. Prince Bethwood shows our peers how it's done by creating the best Netflix action movie thus far. The trick of Prince Bethwood movie is that rather than simply investing in lavish set piece and costing on charismatic actors, the director and screenwriter Greg Rukta put in the work of making you care about these characters. The action is still top notch, but the film never shies away from its more melancholy and darker aspect. It makes for a tricky balancing act, but Prince Bathford pulls it off with style to spare. Andy, played by Charlize Theron, is an immortal warrior who has been fighting for Melina. Along the way, she is picked up Pharaoh, immortal Booker, and lover Joy and Nikki to help her in various missions. When the team gets a new gig, it turns out to be a trap sprung by the mysterious Mr. Copley at the behest of Parametrical Company CEO Merrick, who wants to exploit the Immortals and seal their abilities. Forced to go on the run, the team's lives are further complicated when they learn of a new immortal. Nile, a marine who now discovers she cannot be killed, as Andy and the team works to evade capture. They also try to bring Nile into the fold and show her the purpose of their missions, as even as Andy wrestling with an essential crisis of feeling like nothing she does matter despite living for thousands of years. After knocking it out of the park with be acclaimed romances, love, and basketball, and Beyond the Lights, Prince Bethwood shows she has no trouble helming an action vehicle. What I like best about these action scenes is that they never spot to draw attention to themselves. Like our heroes, the action is clean, quick, efficient, and brutal. The design flows from how the characters behave rather than Prince Bethwood setting up an elaborate honor to show that she can. Other Netflix movies have tried to sell the action as a virtue in and of itself, but Prince Bethwood knows that character is key, so it's all well and good to see Theron destroy a bunch of faceless goons by wielding an axe. It's more important that we sympathize with Andy and her arc. Those characters' arc help separate the old guard from other Netflix movies like Six Underground, Extraction, and Spencer Confidential. Every member of the old guard gets treated like a real person, and that matter would you have supernatural element like quick healing and immortality. Bathwood and Rukta play to the sober reality of these characters never being able to die, and rather than playing it up like a cool ability, the filmmakers latch on to the saddest of it all. For Andy, she feels like she has not done any good because she is unable to see the full scope of her actions. Broker has a heartbreaking monologue about how if you try to live normally, your loved ones will resent you for staying younger while they grow old and die. Nile has to come to grips that her inability to die means loving behind her family. Bathford invested characters beat with as much as energy and attention as the action scenes, and the old guard is all the richer for it. I also have to call special attention to the relationship between Joe and Nikki. While other studios are trying to earn brownie points because a character has an off and gay moment that can easily be excised for international release. The old guard is unapologetic about having two of its action heroes be romantically in love with each other. If Joe and Nikki got a spin off, I would watch it gladly as Kenzari and Marinelli seal their action cops and chemistry in equal measures. There's a scene where Joe proclaims his love for Nikki with such passion and ardor that it's as charged as a highly choreographed gunfight. Again, it comes back to character, and for a film with franchise potential like The Old Guard, I'd be more than happy to spend more time with these people and their centuries of baggage. Although Netflix like to follow formulas to the point where it feels like some of their programming is developed by algorithm instead of people, the old guard shows the value of using the formula as a springboard to something better. It starts out in the same place of a bunch of mercenaries on a mission, mixed with a little superhuman ability, but because Prince Bathwood puts her character at the forefront of the movie instead of a bunch of set pieces or one liner, she has a much stronger movie. thanks to her skilled and thoughtful direction, the old guard feels new. The old guard biggest unanswered question from the Netflix movie. Netflix new action drama The Old Guard leaves some big question unanswered, like because of plans to expand the story and into a trilogy of movies. The old card follows Andy, the leader of the team of immortal warriors whose self-assigned mission is to fight on the right side of history. The team includes Booker, Joy, and Nikki, soon to be joined by a new immortal US Marine, Niall Freeman. Things grow more complicated when the team's secret is uncovered by the former CIA agent Copley, who hands evidence of their immortality over to pharmaceutical company CEO Maverick. Merrick wants the immortal captured so he can discover the secret of immortality and the end of disease for all. Based on Greg Docker's original comic series of the same name, Ruka also served as writer on the production. The old guard proved a refreshing take on the superhero genre, treating the character's ability as both a gift and a great burden. While Netflix has yet to announce a sequel, the movie's ambiguous ending does effectively set up a potential sequel. Indeed, director Gina Prince-Bythewood confirmed in an interview with Digital Spy that the old card was planned as the start of the trilogy, explaining that Ruka always envisioned that as a trilogy. I know where the story goes and it's pretty great. So, if the audience is eager for it, there's definitely more stories to tell. Is therefore make sense of the old guard to leave some of its biggest question unanswered as the way of tickling audience curiosity and incurring demand for a sequel. With this in mind, there are some major questions left unanswered and not just the ones set up by the old card's final scene. Ruka explained that he wanted to make it really clear that the first story is not concerned with the how or the why of their immortality, likely to keep the story action driven and avoid being weighed down by too much exposition. His statement also indicated an intention to explore the mythology further should a sequel be greenlit. Below are some of the questions the old guard that fans wanted answered. How did the old guard become immortal? One of the biggest questions posed by the Netflix movie is how the team become immortal in the first place. It is something the heroes ponder themselves and the audience receives no answers. Does immortality manifest randomly? Is it the result of some genetic mutation according to that if the X-Men, some diamond gift bestowed on a select few? What is certain is that none of the characters seems to hold the answer, but perhaps more will to be revealed in future. How old is Andy? Andy's age becomes something of a recurring joke throughout the film. Niall asks her about it repeatedly, but Andy maintains that she does not remember how long she has been immortal. While this could be true, or she has in fact forgotten her early years, it is just as likely that Andy prefers to keep that part of her life private. That the old goddess rival is that Andy predates the other warriors by many centuries. She spent time being worshipped as a goddess, and it is suggested that Andy was once known as the Queen of the Amazon, Andromache, and battled Heracles. Safe to say that she has been around for an exceptionally long time. Thought it would be interesting to know exactly how long and to uncover more of her history. How and why did Andy lose her immortality? The old god established that through long lasting immortality is not permanent. No one knows when or why immortals become mortal again, but the warriors do know their fate is unavoidable. Around halfway through the movie, Andy realizes that she is not healing from a stab wound she suffered, indicating she is now mortal. When she is later captured, her sudden loss of immortality puzzles Copley and Merrick, and the audience is equally left without an explanation. It is possible that, much like the comic, the movie will not delve into the how of immortality but rather focus on the impact it has on the characters. A sequel would therefore see Andy recon with her newfound mortality without attempting to explain it. Can Andy regain her immortality? Is there a chance that Andy might regain her immortality? Her friend and fellow immortal Nikon, this far the only immortal to lose his ability, died in combat. It therefore remains possible that immortality could return just as it went away, or that there is a way for it to be regained. Even if Andy herself is content to die, perhaps our team members are not ready to lose their fearless leader and friend and will seek to restore her abilities. How did Cohen explain? Cohen was Andy's partner and friend for hundreds of years until they were both captured during the Orpian witch hunts. After failing to die from hanging, a group of priests decide to separate the two women and trap Queen in an Iron Maiden, sending her to the bottom of the sea where she could never be found. In the movie's most haunting scenes, viewers witness Koyana being forced to drown, die, and be reborn over and over for 5 centuries. She was trapped in her metal coffin for hundreds of years, yet by the movie's end, it is revealed that Cohen has finally escaped. How? Viewers will have to wait for a sequel to find out. How does Queen wants with Booker? The two never met, but it is likely the Queen also had vision of new immortals, much like Andy and the team had when Nile first died. She approaches Booker only a few months after she is exiled from the immortal group of his betrayal, and he finds her waiting for him in his apartment. What does Queen wants with him? It is likely she approaches him as a way of getting to Andy. Whether she wants to reconnect with her old companion to seek revenge is unclear, though the latter seems more probable given the suffering she endured. How do the old guard know how to save? Later in the movie, Copley reveals that the old guard has saved hundreds of people throughout history. Many of whom would go on to save humanity in some way, be it by preventing a nuclear catastrophe or by making some life-altering scientific discovery. Is it just confidence? Does the team save so many people that merely through the laws of probability, some are bound to go on to play crucial parts in directing human history? Or could it be that some higher power is controlling their action, pointing them in the right direction like pawns on a chessboard? Are there more immortals? Could there be more immortals in the world that the old guard are unaware of? Are people much like the nail, laying dormant and ignorant of their mortality until the time of their death? It is doubtful that throughout the entirety of human history, only 7 immortals have existed. Perhaps a sequel to the old card would see the team confronted with other like them. The Old Guard, 5 ways it's a great action movie, and 5 ways the comic is better. Streaming out of nowhere, The Old Guard recently took Netflix by storm, providing an action movie fully of characters fans fell in love with, plus some of the best actors working in the action scene today. What may surprise fans is that Netflix's latest hit is actually based on a graphic novel series of the same name. As with any adaptation, one can only assume that changes will be made. That wasn't really true here, yet one has to wonder which one ended up being better. Is it the movie or is it the comic book? Blue or few arguments. Movie a visual representation of the tale. There's no doubt about it, the old guard has an action-packed and exciting movie, Thra and Thra. It was visually stunning thanks in no small part to the efforts put in by the actors involved. In short, it was a visually appealing rendition of the same comic that many falls fell in love with. It took the action to a whole new level while also doing its best to stay true to those scenes at the same time. There's more to it. The old God comics continue on beyond the point that the movie ending on. Now, granted, the movie could very well get a sequel, but at the moment, if one wants to learn more about what happened next, they are going to have to pick up the graphic novel in order to do so. It also includes many more details, both about what has been happening and about the past, mostly about Andy's past. Movie it has a better villains. The old card changed a few things between the graphic novel and the movie. One of the biggest changes was the villain himself. In the graphic novel, Merrick is still the CEO of his company, but he is a twisted man through and through. He is clearly a fan of violence and does not blink twice about doing what needs to be done to get more he wants. Meanwhile, the movie version of Maverick took a different spin where he is a Pavlak CEO and one who practically was on slim and incompetence is really more of an announce than an adversary. There's less obfuscation around certain character. In the graphic novel, it feels like many of the characters are a bit more straightforward. Each of the characters has their own plot arc, tough to varying degree. While Eddie's realistic dominance in the comics, there's a less obfuscation occurring on the sidelines. Characters' motivations are clearer, as are the hints about what is to come next, mainly resolving around Andy's past and the not too dead characters. These more obvious hints want Dieter to start looking more closely, which enhance that type of viewing experience. Movie spot on casting decision. As mentioned earlier, the acting in the old guard is part of the reason why it ended up being so amazing. There were many surprising casting decisions made for the film, but all of it actually ended up making for a better movie. Charlize Theron, KiKi Layne, Matthias, Marwan, Luca, Chiwetel and Harry Melling as Merrick were all perfect for the roles. There's more backstory. The movie adaptation of the old guard ended up cutting out a lot of the backstory for the characters. Well, mainly backstory for Andy because there's a lot of it. So for any fans wanting to know more about her long life, the comics are the best way to go. It seems like each new change in events or Sandy triggered a memory on Andy's part, revealing just a little bit more about her and her history. It shows how much she has changed with time, ironically enough. Niall's role is bigger and better. The Netflix version of the old guard made a point of expanding upon Niall's role and to great effect in the graphic novel. Niles felt more like a footnote in Andy's very long journey. In the movie, Nile had an entire plot to herself. In fact, she ended up being pivotal for saving the day, all while dealing with her own turmoil, both with losing her family and with the concept of immortality. Her story was suddenly full of nonsense and it made her feel more human than ever. The art style. The art style of the old guard is one of the highlights of the comics. The viewers know exactly, or the readers know, that means here. There's a rugged style, sharper edges, and the likes, as well as heavy use of negative space to imply gore and damage. Okay, there's still a whole lot of gore actually shown, which should say something right here. The style of the old guard is one of the reasons why it has done so well, as it is iconic and memorable. It's not the sort of things easily replicated in movie format, which by no fault of its own looks like just how about every other well made action movie out there, cutting unnecessary elements. The movie adaptation also made one other major change, this time cutting out unnecessary parts. The graphic novel showcased more detail about salvage trading. All of this was mentioned in the movie, but that was more to set the scene. Removing the unnecessary details and visual was the right call. It made the movie more streamlined and really allowed it to exist better in the world of action movies. There were simply fewer complications this way. More questions and answers. The graphic novels that inspired the movie provided both answered and question, offering plenty of food for thought thanks to the long legs of the characters involved. That's not all that surprising. There are moral and ethical debates to be found everywhere, especially as one digs deeper into their backstories. It's an interesting balance, but it's also perfect for fans that want answer or for those who that want a series what will make them think and ponder over big questions. The comics will do both, where sees the movie had no choices but to water some of these ideas down to fit the runtime. 10 questions we have after watching The Old Guard. Thought the summer movie season was pretty much cancelled in 2020. There have been some solid films available for home viewing. One of the most popular choices this year has been Netflix action adventure The Old Guard. The film stars Charlize Theron as the leader of a group of immortal warriors who have been fighting for good in the world of centuries. The movie was a massive hit and there is already plans for a sequel. But with the complex world building and fancy element of the old guard, there are still a lot of bargaining questions that fans want to have answered. How old is Andy? Theron delivers as another badass action hero role with her performance as Andromach aka Andy. She is the leader of the small group of warriors who have been fighting years all over the world for countless years. Despite spending centuries together, the rest of the team still doesn't know how much about Andy. They know that she was the first of their kind and that she had lost allies along the way, but exactly how old she is still remains a closely guarded secret. How have they stayed hidden for so long? Along with liver extended lives, the warriors have concluded that they must also cut ties with the rest of the world so that they can protect their secrets. However, even with their extra persuasion, how could they have lasted this long without being noticed? We see Andy get accidentally photographed by some tourist at one point, so she borrows their phone and deleted the photo. Do they do that every time they pop up in a picture? Doesn't she know about the iCloud? It seems like a sloppy way of covering their tracks. How did Copley learn their secret? Despite the unlikelihood of it, the team was able to remain under the radar for hundreds of years, but while the rest of the world remained oblivious, a man named Copley was able to learn about them and their powers and track them down. Copley explained that there were hints and legends of them throughout history which he pieced together. But how did he go from hearing ancient legends of immortal warrior to mapping their entire existence? Did someone knock him in the right direction? What about Niall's family? Niall is the audience introduction to the strange world. She is a soldier who is attacked and fatally wounded in battle, only to wake up later to find that she is miraculously healed and quickly find her and recruit her to the team. Being new to this, Niall still has a lot of reservation and grapples with how her wound has healed and how his world has changed. One of our biggest struggles is not being able to see our family. Andy told her the dangers of reconnecting with them. Will she attempt to see her loved one again? Why do their powers eventually fade? The movie has a lot of heavy lifting to do with establishing the role of this world. One of the major ones is that while these warriors are currently immortal, it doesn't last forever. At some random point for all of them, their powers will fade and they can be killed. This rule is firmly established, but there is still a lot unclear about it. The loss of power could be related to a new immortal emerging as Niall's introduction coincided with Andy losing her power. It's also unclear if the immortality can return once it has been lost. How did Queen escape? And the explanation of Andy's backstory, we learn the tragic story of Queen, the first immortal Andy ever met. Andy and Queen were partnered in many battles over the years until they were imprisoned by those who thought they were demons. Queen was given the horrific fate of being locked in an iron chest and sunk to the bottom of the ocean, where she would drown over and over again for centuries. However, the end of the movie revealed that somehow Queen escaped her doomed fate. What will their blood be used for? When the world gets wind up these people with incredible immortal powers, it does not take long for greedy people to look for ways of exploiting this miracle. Copley revealed this existence to a pharmaceutical company in the hopes of using their power to cure illness. Of course, the corporate villains are only interested in profit and torture the immortals, taking their blood and tissue sample. Thought our team eventually break free and kill the bad guys. Could their blood be used to create new immortals? What does Queen wants with Booker? Booker is a member of the team who feels their life as immortal is a curse and he seeks a way to be freed. He betrayed the rest of the team to corporate bad guys in hopes that they will find a way to kill them for good. He eventually redeems himself but is still exiled for the group. At the end of the film, Queen comes to visit Booker, revealing herself to be alive. How did Kenny know who Booker was? How does she want with him now that he is exiled? Does she blame Andy for what happened and is seeking revenge? How did they know how to save? Instead of living the lives of daredevils, the team has dedicated their incredible power to fighting against evil and helping people all over the world. As it turns out, their random acts of heroism had an even bigger impact than they know. Copley reveals that through his research into Andy and her escaped throughout the years that whenever she saves the day, she ends up saving the life of someone who will go on to make the world a better place. How does Andy know which lives to save the will benefit the world? What will Andy do now? Shortly after finding Niall, Andy discovers that she can no longer heal and she seems to have lost her immortality. Despite this, she is still a phenomenal warrior and managed to fight her way through hordes of bad guys and survive. But at the end of the film, she appears to be staying with the team while she just fights alongside them until she is killed. Will she attempt to go live the rest of her days in peace? The old guard feature a group of immortal warriors. Most of the whom have been alive for centuries, but how old are they exactly? The marketing material and movie itself offer several clues to the immortals' ages. Charlize Theron Andy is the oldest, but most of our companions have had very long lives as well. Directed by Gina Prince-Bythewood and based on the comic book series The Old God by Greg Rucka and Leonardo Fernandez, the Netflix movie follows a team of warriors who have lived in the shadows of centuries, taking part in conflicts on whichever side they feel is right. The old guard is the modern day where a new immortal soldier Nile Fury Man joins the group after miraculously healing from having her throat cut. She is quickly initiated into the small group of warriors and learn how they have influenced history. While she is still learning about her new family, they come under threat from a greedy pharmaceutical executive called Stephen Merrick, played by Harry Melling, who hopes to discover the secret to their immortality, battle it, and put a price tag on it. Unfortunately for Merrick, he is not the first bad guy that the old guard has run into during their very long lifetime. Here's a breakdown of when each member of the group besides Andy was born and how old they are in the modern day setting of the movie. How old is Andy in the old guard? While the movie form of the old guard keeps Andy's age ambiguous, it is known that she is the oldest member of the group. Her full name, Andromache of Sakathia, refers to a Central Asian empire that ended in the 2nd century CE, making Andy at least 1800 years old but likely older. A potential The Old Guard sequel could expand the mythology by exploring this. However, the comics suggest that Andy is even older than her name suggests. Rocta and Fernandez comic depict Andy was being born circa 4500 BCE in the western steppe of Scythia. Andy developed importantly after being killed in battle and led her tribe for hundreds of years. However, after centuries she left her position to seek justice and find other immortals. Andy even gives a precise age in the comics of 6732, meaning of that she has been serving humanity for over 6 millennia. Queen approx 1500 years ago in the comic. Seen only in flashback in the old guard final scene, Queen's age is perhaps the hardest to pin down out of all the immortals. In the comic she is called Nerako, and Andy recalls that they first met at the end of Amr ibn al-Aslafami conquest of the Byzantine Empire in 642, at which point Nerko had already been an immortal for a century. That puts her date of birth sometime in early 500 AD, which could make her around 1500 years during the events of the Old Guard. However, in the movie it's not specified exactly when or where Andy and Queen met. Expect that Andy found Queen when she was wandering through the desert, and that she was the first that immortal that Andy ever met. Many have speculated that Andy and Queenie will fight in the Old Guard too. In the comics, Andy met Lycaon before she met Nerko, and they fought together for 2000 years. Lycaon also appeared briefly in a flashback in the Old Guard, with Andy and Queenie both being presented at the time of his death. If Queenie has been aged up in order to have been born before Lycaon, she could actually be several thousand years old during the events of the movie. Hopefully, the audience will learn more about her backstory, including her age, in the Old Guard too. Yusuf Al-Kasani Akajo, 955 years old. According to his character poster Joy, Marwan Kenzari was born in 1066, making him 954 years old at the time of the Old Guard takes place. Originally called Yusuf al-Kasani, Joy was a Muslim warrior during the First Crusade who met the love of his life on the battlefield and killed him. However, fate chose them as the next immortal to join the Old Guard, and after repeatedly slaying each other, they realized that neither they nor the enemy soldier could be killed, at which point their enmity turned to love. Nicole T. Jonga aka Nikki, 951 years old, younger than Joy by only a few years, which grow even less significant as the centuries pass. Nikki is 951 years old during the events of the Old Guard, based on a character poster that gives her years of birth as 1069. This means that he would have been in his late 20s, 30 at most, the first time he died. Like Joe and Andy, Nicky changed his name at some point from Nichols of Genoa to the more common name of Nicky Smith in order to aid his anonymity. This period of the Crusade has been a popular setting for movies as well as video games like Assassin's Creed and Crusader Kings, hailing from the city of Conva in what would later become the unified century of Italy. Nicky fought in the first Crusade until he fell in love with one of the enemy and instead began fighting new battles alongside him. After settling their differences, Joy and Nicky both met Andy and became part of the Old Guard alongside her and Queenie. Sebastian Lee Laverack aka Booker, 250 years old, the baby of the group at least until night comes along. Booker is 250 years old during the events of the Old Guard, with his character poster marking his year of birth as 7070. His treacherous action made it unclear whether he'll return for a potential the Old Guard too. Barnes Sebastian Lee Laverack, his nickname comes from his store name, which is French for Booker. Booker was a soldier under Napoleon who deserted during the campaign into Russia. He was fought and hanged but came back to life still hanging from the nose, being 42 years old at the time of his first death in 1812. As he lived on without aging, Booker experiences the trauma of watching his sons die and being helpless to stop them, even as they grown to hate him for not sharing his gift of immortality. Being a young immortal, the hereditary peasant that Booker is sentenced to at the end of the Old Guard would still be a significant amount of time for him. Niall Freeman, 26 years old. A pivotal part of the Old Guard cast is Niall, who acts as a viewpoint character, a brand new member of the Old Guard. Niall Freeman is 26 years when she dies for the first time, having her throat cut while trying to save the life of a man she has just shot. After she wakes up in the infirmary without a mark to show for her injury, she is shunned by her fellow soldier and about to be sent away for some probably very unpleasantly testing when she is abducted by Andy. Niall has a military legacy to uphold with her further having been killed in action, but also has a family that she is at first kneel to return to. For the first time in this summer of the Plague year 2020, I'm not sorry to be missing all the big loud comic book movies we are being bombarded with in the non-pandemic alt timeline. I like those movies, love them, mostly even when they are also existing, but they do tend to dominate the pop culture conversation. With them off the radar this year, there's a room to breathe for a fantastic little pulp comic book movie like The Old Guard, debuting on Netflix on Friday. In fact, if we are ready to consider the superhero tentpole dynamic flurries of exclusive movies across different franchises, all vying for our attention with their ever-expanding cardinals of spectacle. The Old Guard offers a blueprint, gets smaller, give us a meta-human, yes, but with more emphasis on the human than the meta. The immortal protagonists of the Old Guard are much more engaging and pathetic as people than comic book stories on screen often manage. The question, would it be to live forever, has been asked plenty often before. but it's back into the story and the character here in a way that feels as deeply authentic as such a fantastical promise can be. There's nothing romantic in any sense of the word, but about never dying for this crew. It's a lot of pain and loss and rage. Here's partly why Andy, played by Charlize Theron, long shot gringo, whose full name maybe one classics would recognize from history, has just about had it with the self-imposed missing of the small group of fellow immortals she lead in helping humanity as much as they can. Because, as she replies when one of them tries to cheer her up with, "We can do some good. Have you seen the news lately? Some good does nothing. You think you are full of despair about the state of the world, and by you, I mean me. Imagine have we actually witnessed it getting to this state in spite of your actions to prevent it." Theron brings it badass here like she has in plenty of other popcorn movies of the late Mad Max Fury Road, Atomic Blonde, but it's how she carries the weight of Andy's anger, the weight of history, that sales is brilliant flicked. Andy is tired. Character is so much more important to the old guard than plot, more intrigued too. The slow reveals of the relationship among Andy's team are a treat to witness, and much of it comes gently. As new baby immortal Nile, if Beale Street could talk, his other movie, is introduced to Andy, Booker, Joy, and Nikki, the latter two of whom are a couple. Their devotion to each other barely snatched yet palpable. One scene in particular in which Joy explains what Nikki means to him in a pump a fist in the air triumph for gay representation on screen. That's one bit I'd have liked to see with a big Roddy and obviously accepting crowd. Huge kudos to screenwriter Craig Rocca adapting his own graphic novel for this and other moments for really juicy dialogue. Not snarky catchphrases but smart, emotionally self-aware conversation that make the old car such a joy. This is a comic book movie and there's a plenty of browsing action to be found here as Andy Square take on yet another do-gooder mercenary job via a CIA operative Copley, which goes bad and lead to further complications. But just as she did with her last film, 2014's pop music romance Beyond the Light, directed Gina Prince-Bythewood, elevates a familiar gender by impressing us in genuine, unsentimental feeling even as she embraced the tropes. I especially love the dynamic between Andy and Niall, a rare mentor-mentee relationship featuring two women. Rocka's script creature that, but Prince Bedford lets the wonderful chemistry between Theron and Layne do the work. Both actors underplay it, dividing the chase there was so much potential for, and finding an empathy that is hard won and eventually a friendship that feels solid among the fisticuffs and firefight. There's a sense here too that the world of this character is so much larger than we see, which should be a given, of course, with the scope of their existence, but was by no means guaranteed. Andy and her team clearly have lives of their own, don't spend all their time together. What else do they get up to? There are hints that there are larger supernatural forces at work arranging elements of some purpose that even Andy, with her vast vision and insight, cannot see. There is mystery here. It reminded me a little of the unearthiness of Unexpectedly Jim Jarre's 2014 vampire drama Only Lover Left Alive. If with a faster pace, this is a word I cannot wait to return to. And with the suggestion that there's a plenty more story to come, I am keeping my fingers crossed that a return visit in the cards. The Old Guard is a new Netflix action film from director Gina Prince-Bythewood and screenwriter Greg Rucka and is based on the graphic novel series by Rucka, which he co-created with Leonardo Fernandez. It stars Charlize Theron as Andy, a modern warrior who leads a group of undying soldiers as they attempt to set right the injustice of the world over the course of human history. After being double-crossed by a CIA operative named Copley who set them up for an ambush disguised as a rescue mission, Andy and her competitor receive a vision of a new immortal, one who does not yet know that she is one of them, and Andy sets out to go and rescue her to the team while the rest of them hide and try to figure out their next move against Copley. At the same time, on a mission in Afghanistan, a young US Marine named Nile, played by KiKi Layne, is killed while attempting to find and arrest a known domestic and international terrorist. After she wakes up to discover that her throat, which was sliced open during the fight, has completely healed, showing no sign of damage. Nile is left to wonder both how and why she seems to have this power most of her fellow soldiers do not possess. Unfortunately, she does not get much time to do so before Andy arrives, and the more she learns about the team and her powers, the less she seems inclined to stay. Meanwhile, the growing threat of big pharma group Merrick, who wants to capture an experience on the team in order to acquire their abilities, draws ever closer, and time for Andy and her team is running out. The movie also stars Matthias Schoenaerts, Marwan Kenzari, Luca Marinelli, and Harry Melling. Netflix tends to have three pretty distinct flavors to their original movie that they don't occur after a major festival are planned to make with well-known filmmakers like Karen or Scorsese. Those that work, those that don't, and those that short of too but cannot quite get where it seems like they want to go. The old guard fought squarely in that attempt camp. It's not that the film is so much bad as it feels somewhat underwhelming, as if a lot of material was left on the cutting room floor in hopes of setting up a sequel they have no guarantee of making. Although, since it's Netflix, the chances of a franchise not happening are slim to none. Many of the most interesting elements in the film are those that surround the narrative but don't directly impact it from a narrative standpoint, like a character from Andy's past that she feels some guilt over but ultimately had to move on from. It's cool seeing the whole team in action, and this movie does have some seriously kick ass action sequence. But what ultimately drives stories like this are the character personal struggle and the personal struggle of the main characters in the movie. Apart from Nile gripping with this new element of her life seems to be freak element, the film is not really all that interesting in exploring. That's not to say it doesn't do any exploring of those elements, but again, what exploring take place only seems to be three mainly to set up a sequel. While the character growth from the exploration is on the B list for priorities, all of this has the effect of making the old guard feel more like a two horror ministries premiere than a movie, and perhaps this narrative would be better explored that way. This would not be a problem, however, if the action sequence in the film were a little more frequent and a little more involved. Don't get me wrong. The action in this film is really great when it's going on, and there's one particular fight on a plane that's aces for its brutality and wit, but as for the rest of them, most don't feel quite long enough or under-edited enough to really make an impact. What's there is cool, but it's not exactly surprising or new or even particularly different from a lot of other action sequences in other movies. Apart from one where Charlize Theron uses a carved axis and goes to town, the final sequence in fact contains one action moment so hyper edited I was briefly tricked into thinking I was watching Taken 3 again. And that is not pleasant sensation. For the average Netflix movie, that's where would do, but for a Theron lead post Mad Max, post John Wick action thriller, I was left wanting a little more. Also, the third act location setting is, well, it's just a boring place for the sequence to be. And this brings us to the biggest issue I have with the old guard apart from the franchise thirst, the villain. At first, Harry Malik's Merrick seems like an interesting villain given that he wants to use the immortal's power to cure disease and whatnot. But all of that is undercut by him being yet another villain that only wants to do those things so he can reap the financial profits. And he has absolutely no backstory or development in the film to show what made him this way. Don't get me wrong, looking at who sits in power in this country today means Merrick is far from a unrealistic villain. But movies don't require that villain be realistic, they required that be interesting. And Merrick is an uninteresting of a villain as we have seen in most of Netflix's other leisure action material. It's not all bad, there's a lot to like about the old guard, which is why, despite my myriad of issue with it, I still had a fairly good time watching it. Like I said, the action while lacking some length is pretty great while it's happening, and a lot of it happens in international location that provide a good amount of variety to how these sequences get played out, as well as a lot of variety in terms of how the movie looks. Sure, the third act location is pretty boring as a wash of grays and whites where some color could have definitely helped the look of the movie, but many of the locations before that are wonderful to see in a mainstream action film. There's also a wonderfully diverse cast of characters that come from all walks of life, including two LGBT characters whose sexualities are not the point of their being included and whose romance is not shuffled off to the side in favor of appealing to the masses that would watch the film. Looking at you, Disney. The best thing about the old card are Charlize Theron and KiKi Layne. Charlize Theron as an action star is hardly surprising. She stole the show in Mad Max Fury Road. She kicked copious amount of ass in Atomic Blonde, and in this movie, she once again lead with a fastness and commanding physicality unrivaled by most other female action heroines. When it comes to power action, almost no one can match or do it better or more convincingly than she does. What is somewhat surprising is how good KiKi Layne is in this film. Only having known her from Barry Jenkins' Sam4 feature, if Bale Street could talk, I admittedly had not seen her in anything else. But still, her commanding rig in this film is something to be commended. You can see the wantonness behind her eyes quite easily when Theron is describing to her all she will have to sacrifice from her old life in order to be the part of this immortal team. And while her character doesn't get a ton of moments to be vulnerable, Layne breaks enough vulnerability out of her performance for us to know she can do a lot more with this character than the film lets on. The others are good too, but those two women both driving and steal the show as far as performance are concerned. The Old Guard is not a bad movie by any stretch. It features solid performance, boosts some kick-ass sequence, and the concept is pretty fun to follow on the whole. But at the end of the day, I was still left wanting a little more, both from its action sequence and its world building. A lot of teasing at larger potential is great, but not if most of the teasing is based in developing a franchise over developing character. And the lack of a more interesting villain to consult with means that the focus cannot be pulled away from that lack of follow through. Despite my overall enjoyment of it, I was left a little overwhelmed by this one. Still, Theron and Layne are a dynamite pair, and even though I wish they had explored more of the world in this movie, I am still interested to see where the story goes. In 2020's cinematic landscape, are we now expected to have the same amount of patience with movie franchise, ones that are set up to sketch over more than a handful of sequels, Marvel and Mission Impossible as we do with TV shows? Should we take the first outing with a pinch of salt as we wait for the character to reveal themselves and the writer to find their stride in later installments? This is the question we have been pondering over since the credit rolls on the Old Guard Netflix new film that is very clearly a palette for a new superhero franchise that's a bit like a middleman between Avengers and Fast and Furious. As a standalone, it's fairly run of the mill, littered with gender cliches. The Chacha Nenito lead, played by Charlize Theron, the unearned double crosses and twist, the overrules of bad pop music to tell the audience how to feel. It's a weighed down by exposition, clunky writing, and predictable storytelling. But its premise it follows a group of immortal mercenaries is strong enough and malleable enough to suggest that the old god could become more interesting and entertaining at a later date. About that promise, it is revealed almost guardedly about half an hour in. We meet Terence Andy, a dark and brood figure, and a few of our brawly male pals, Matthias Schoenaerts, Marwan Kenzari, and Luca Marinelli, also dark, also broody. They appear to be a group of vigilant militants who take on particularly dangerous missions. On these occasions, they have been asked to save a group of girls who have been abducted for the purpose of human tricking in Sudan. When they get thrown to the room where the girls are supposed to be, after effortlessly dispatching of a group of soldiers, they about that promise it is revealed almost giggly about half an hour in. We meet Theron Andy, a dark and broody figure, and a few of our brawly male pals, Matthias, Marwan, and Luca, also dark, also broady. They appear to be a group of vigilant militants who take on particularly dangerous missions. On this ocean, they have been asked to save a group of girls who have been abducted for the purpose of human trafficking in Sudan. While they get through to the room where the guards are supposed to be, after effortlessly dispatching of a group of soldiers, they realize the whole operation has been a setup. A firing squad armed with assault rifle guns them down crazily. Their bullets littered bodies drop to the floor. Game over, right? That's it for Charlize in her starting role. Then, Nop lying dead on the floor, their bodies begin to heal and the bullets are squeezed out of their skin like zits. They get up and do away with the remaining soldiers. So, yeah, they are immortal. No one seems to know how or why is it that it. As you might expect, this kind of takes the setting out of the fight scene. If they cannot die, they cannot lose, rendering most of the action quite meaningless. In fact, in kind of renders the whole thing meaningless. Some jeopardy is injected by way of more exposition with various characters explaining that these people have been around for centuries. There have been various villainous folk who have captured them or killed them over and over for decades, arguably a fate worse than death. One former colleague they mournfully discussed was sealed in an iron coffin and dropped to the bottom of the ocean, never to be seen again. We get a few glimpses of their former lives in centuries past, with flashbacks to Charlize in a dodgy wig dispatching enemies with an axe, which she still carries around in the present day. And then some new blood comes in the form of a newly minted immortal, KiKi Layne, a soldier who is killed in a combat only to come back to life shortly afterwards. Charlize goes and recruits the somewhat reluctant and sadly unwritten new superhero and he kicks off a series of events that leads to some of the crew being captured by an evil scientist. Harry Millen, aka Dudley from Peter. After this, there's a series of twists which the writing doesn't quite justify, but hey, people love twists, some decent action scenes, and about 6 different endings, most of which are planting seeds for future installments. Before the credit roll, it does just enough to spark theme interest in the future of the Netflix movie franchise. Just after the success of 2020's The Old Guard, Netflix was quick to order a sequel, but details about the forthcoming The Old Guard 2 have been scanned. The action thriller centers on a team of seemingly immortal warriors who change the course of world history by protecting humanity. Directed by Gina Prince-Bythewood, The Old Guard is based on the eponymous graphic novel by Greg Rucka and Leonardo Fernandez. Charlize Theron starred as Andy, the leader and oldest member of the Retailer group. The film adaptation follows her attempts to save and protect US Marine Niall Freeman, who is killed in action but then comes back to life. Dropped on Netflix during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, the film found instant success and the extensive mythology of the old guard. A sequel was a distant possibility, though Netflix quickly greenlit the old guard 2. The project has moved slowly. The old guard 2 latest news. After getting a positive update back in February 2024, the latest news confirmed that Old Guard 2 is finally moving forward again after months of delays. Returning star Charlize Theron spoke to Variety and shed some light on the status of the long-awaited action sequel, pinning the further delay on a changing of the guard at Netflix. Theron did tire viewers by saying that post-production was finally getting back underway after Netflix shake-up. Theron said that Netflix went through quite a changeover. We got kind of stuck in that and our post-production shut down. I think 5 weeks into it, they were going through a lot of changes and I totally understand it. We finally picked it back up and I am really excited about it. It's really good. It's a really important film to us. I only wanted to do it if we could make it amazing. I really love this movie. The Old Guard 2 production status. Work was underway in early 2024 until a change of management at Netflix stalled the editing process for 5 weeks. Even though Netflix jumped at the opportunity to order a sequel, The Old Guard 2 has taken much longer than the usual Hollywood project. The film wrapped principal photography in 2022 and has been locked in the post-production phase ever since. Work was underway in early 2024 until a change of management at Netflix stalled the editing process for 5 weeks. However, Charlize Theron has confirmed that work is back underway as of July 2024. The Old Guard 2 cast. Around the same time that the sequel was announced, it was also confirmed that the main cast of the first film would return in its entirety. Led by Charlize Theron as Andy, the sequel has been able to maintain continuity while also adding some big names to the cast as well. Along with the returning stars, Academy Award nominee Uma Thurman has been dropped to play an undisclosed role. Similarly, Henry Golding of Crazy Rich Asian fame star in a part that has not been announced yet. The entire known cast includes Charlize Theron as Andy, KiKi Layne as Niall Freeman, Marwan Kenzari as Joy, Luca Marinelli as Nikki, Matthias as Booker, Veronica as Quinn, Chiwetel Ejiofor as James Copley, Uma Thurman, unknown, and Henry Golding is unknown. The Old Guard story. The Old Guard ends with Merrick being defeated and Andy becoming mortal. After being set up by Booker, Andromach of Sophia is less than pleased and banishes her friend from the team for a full century. Enter Copley, who is required to help the Old Guard operate quickly. Over the years, members of the team have been seen in photos, so they will need to find new ways to stay under the radar. 6 months after Booker and his colleagues part ways, Quina, the first immortal that Andy found, re-emerged in a Paris apartment after being trapped underwater in a coffin for 500 years. NGO will be key to the Old Guard 2 storyline, and it is expected that Andy and Quinn will have a complicated relationship upon reuniting. Based on the final moment of the Old Guard, it seems like Quinn could be the sequel's primary villain, if only because of her menacing demeanor. It was also revealed that the ending of the Old Guard 2 will set up a trilogy, meaning whatever happened in the sequel will not be the end of the story. The Old Guard's twist ending leaves it open for a sequel. With this antiseptic tone, diverse cast, and restrained yet thrilling approach to action sequence, Netflix The Old Guard breathed new life into the superhero movie. In the film, which is based on Greg Rucka comics, Andy, played by Charlize Theron, leads an immortal band of warriors that spends the centuries trekking across the globe, fighting for just cause and saving lives just as the groups take on a new recruit, US Marine Niall, They have to face off against a new, thoroughly modern foe, Merrick, the evil pharma executive who wants to kidnap them and study the source of their centuries long lives. The movie's ending leaves the door open to a sequel, one that director Gina Prince-Bythewood says could be a very real possibility. What happened at the end of the old guard? In the movie's climax, Andy and her fellow soldier Booker head off to rescue their comrade Joe and Nikki, who are already being held in Merrick's lab. To find their pals, they track down former CIA agent Copley, who earlier set a trap for the team with a fake mission in order to obtain video proof of their healing powers. But Booker, who has a genuine death wish after being alive for more than 2 centuries, double crosses his friends and hands himself and Andy over to Merrick. In the course of the action, Andy is shot in the stomach but doesn't heal instantly, revealing that she has lost her immortality as all members of the old guard do in time. Luckily, Nile, who had earlier planned to rejoin her family, decided instead to rescue the rest of the gang. Copley, who turned them over in the hopes of finding a cure for disease in the wake of his wife's illness and death, decided to help Nile free her bodies. Nile successfully breaks Andy, Brooker, Joy, and Nikki free and kills Merrick by tracking him out of the high rise window. She is totally fine, of course. In the end, the old guard pretty much returned to business as usual, but with the knowledge that any mission could be Andy's last and with Booker on a century long time out of betraying the group. But the movie also has pre-credit scene that open the door to a sequel. The exiled Booker, who now spends his time getting drunk in his native France, returned to his apartment to find Queen waiting for him. Now we learned Queen's story earlier in the film, and she is cautionary tale for why the old guard really do not want to be captured. Way back in the Middle Ages, Andy and Queen were partners before they were captured and tied as witches. The fact there are no method of execution managed to kill them really seems to back up the witch theory. So Queen was locked in an iron coffin and thrown into the sea. She spent the next 500 years locked in a box, unable to die and slowly losing her mind. So Queen's back and checking in on Booker. The fact that she didn't look up Andy and instead knocking on the door on the one expelled member of the old guard makes it seem likely that she has been positioned as the big bad for any potential sequel. And having spent half a millennium in a box with nothing but her governess for company, Queenie could definitely be ready to rise hell. According to Prince Bythewood, the old guard's future depends on how audience respond to the film. It is fully up to the audience if they want to see more. I mean, Greg, this story of the old guard has always been a trilogy, she told Esquire. And the new one actually just came out a couple of weeks ago, so I know where the story is going and it's pretty great. So if the audience wants more, then there's absolutely more story to tell. The old guard ending explain what do you do with forever. The Netflix original movie The Old Guard has finally landed on Netflix, directed by Gina Prince-Bythewood. The Old Guard is adapted from the 2017 Image comic release The Old Guard, written by Greg Rocca, drawn by Lorenzo Fernandez, and colored by Daniela Miwa, with Rocca adapting his work for the big screen. The Old Guard stars Charlize Theron, Matthias Schoenaerts, Marwan Kenzari, and Luca Marinelli as the titular team of immortals who have found one another throughout the centuries. Included in the Old Guard team is Andy, short for Andromach, is around 6,000 years old and has spent lifetimes tracking up more experience, knowledge, and grief than she cares to discuss. Joy and Nikki are partners who begin their life together as soldiers, fighting on opposite sides during the Crusades, killing each other repeatedly before falling in love. And Booker, a Frenchman who served in Napoleon's army and still grapples with the weight of outliving his loved ones. At the same time, the old guard's covered as immortal is blown during a botched rescue mission. An American soldier named Nile survives a horrible incident which alerts the team to her existence as a possible new immortal. Andy brings the uneasy Nile into the fold, giving the newest immortal a front row seat for the old guard's battle against a pharmaceutical company looking to harness their mortality for its own profit. The end of the old guard is an emotional ride, and if you survived it, you deserve a nice hug. Previous to the third act, which begins with Booker, Andy, and Nile preparing to confront Copley, the former FBI agent who set them up at the start of the movie as an effort to expose them as immortals to Pharma Bro Merrick about what he's done to them, feeling unease about the impending confrontation and more concerned with saying goodbye to her family before going to live her immortal life. Nile takes the team's car and leaves Andy and Booker at Copley House. In a twist, Nile stops the car and route to the train station and decided to double back. She discovers the gun Andy gave her for protection was the same gun Booker gave Andy, and that gun had no bullets. Realizing Booker was setting Andy up to be captured and exams at the Merrick laboratory alongside Nikki and Joy, taken by the Merrick team earlier in the movie. Nile heads to Copley House. Andy and Booker attempt to confront Copley. Booker shoots Andy, giving her a potential fatal wound to her side and exposing the truth she can no longer heal, a sign her immortality has faded and she can actually die. Booker exposes himself as a traitor, allowing himself to be taken into custody by Merrick alongside Andy. Nile gets there too late, instead recruiting Copley to help her storm the Merrick labs. The Merrick Lab's rescue is perhaps the most straightforward part of the old guard's ending. Nile goes into the lab, prepared to finally put her immortality to the test by making her way through all of Merrick's armed guards. She makes her way to free the team as they strategize. Joy is none too pleased with Booker's betrayal, which was revealed as all four sat prepared to become test subjects. Andy makes a plea for the team to fight their way out of the lab before figuring out what to do about Booker. They pull it off, with Andy and Nile choosing an old trick shown earlier which allows Andy to sink her double-headed axe into Merrick's shoulder before Nile tackling out of the high rise, and they plummet to Merrick's death. After this, the old guard has to decide Booker's fate even though he cannot die, but the team decided is somehow equally as thought. Andy delivers the news Booker is exiled from his family and will be able to rejoin the group after 100 years spent on his own. After a morose Frenchman who is still shouting through the grief of being the sole surviving member of his family, this is a particularly tough sentence. Andy, knowing chances are very good she will die before they know that she is technically mortal, cares as an emotional goodbye with her longtime friend before the group sets off. Unlike most action or superhero movies, the old guard spends as much time showing off the team's superpower of immortality while hunting down Copley and Merrick as it does, allowing room to contemplate what it means to be immortal. What is the burden of immortality? What is the gift of immortality? What should you do when you know you will live for decades upon decades? What does it mean to watch those who love die while you got to live on? And perhaps more importantly, the old guard asks whether living outside the mortal boundary is really worth it is in the end. It's clear from the very beginning that Andy, Booker, Joy, and Nikki take their lot in life very seriously. Yes, they are able to find moments of joy together and even richer experience knowing they share a special, deep bond unlike anything shared by other people. But they take their immortality seriously rather than spend their extended lives partying or racking up wealth or doing something similarly outrageous. The old gods has adopted on a nomadic existence for the sake of taking a mission which allow them to help others. They are heroes who work under the cover of anonymity. They are the superheroes we all spend our days reading about or watching in movies, but we don't know anything about. They do their work for an illustrative point of view. If they must live forever and have the ability to, say, build up a particular set of skills, why not put it to good use? And so, the old guard asks us to consider our own relationship to the notion of immortality and legacy. What do we want to do with the time we have been given on the planet? How do we want to help others with the gifts we have, even if those gifts don't include stellar hand to hand combat and weapons training? The old guard never pressures or demands you take a firm sense. It wants you to simply consider. The movie uses Andy, Booker, Joy, Nikki, and Niall as examples, showing them as they repeatedly process their grief, loss, anger, fear, and joy while living life on the fringes. It's easy to assume every member of the old guard has found the answer to these big questions, but this movie shows you they don't, because age does not necessarily forth wisdom or the confidence that comes with wisdom and growth in a lifelong process. The old guard's final moment leave the path clear for another movie as Andy, Niall, Nikki, and Joy look at Copley's research and marvel at all of the ways in which their good acts have rippled out over time. Niall tells Andy maybe this is the why Andy, and just like that, a decision is made. Andy charges Copley with the task of helping them stay on any imaginable grid, turning them into the ghost they cannot actually be so they can continue to do work they have been doing for centuries. Not only is Copley made to keep them off the radar, but Andy also tasks him with finding those jobs that are best suited to us. Even though no official sequel to the old guard has been announced, it is very possible to continue this story. Despite Andy now very much living a mortal life, she is still the leader of the team and ready to fight it out until it's her time to go. With Nikki, Joy, and Niall there to protect her, it's very possible for the old guard to continue to do their work and remain a team. Now the door is wide open for Andy and Co to go forth and to figure out how they want to spend the remaining time they have, and they have the narrative freedom to do it. One final thing to remember and consider, the old guard never clearly ties up the loose ends for Quinn, the second oldest member of the team who fought alongside Andy for centuries. It is revealed Quinn and Andy were imprisoned and tied up as witches in the 14th or 15th century. They were repeatedly tortured in attempts to kill them for their ability. Queen was eventually separated from Andy and locked away in an Iron Maiden and thrown into the sea. Niall is still able to sense Queen's presence, which means Andy's former comrade has been drowning and returning to life is an endless loop for hundreds of years, slowly going mad in the process and then crushly returning to land to meet with Book. With Queen still alive and very much a wild card, there could still be a way to incorporate her into the old guard story if that story does, in fact, continue. The Old Guard is now available to stream on Netflix. The Old Guard ending and sequel setup explain. Netflix The Old Guard concluded with some truly thrilling action and a twist reveal that perfectly set up a sequel. So here's a breakdown of everything that happened in that ending. Created Graf Rocta and Leonardo Fernandez, the story began as a comic book series released in 2017. The Old Guard Volume 1 Opening Fire was published by Image Comic and ran for 5 issues. Well received by critics and comic book fans alike, Rocta and Fernandez have since produced a follow-up, The Old Guard Volume 2. Force multiplied despite some delays due to the coronavirus pandemic. The second 5-issue run is set up to conclude in 2020. Extremely faithful to the source material, The Old Guard was adapted by Netflix and centers on a group of immortals led by Andromech of Scathia, aka Anti, played by Charlize Theron. The group is revealed to have spent centuries fighting for humanity. After countless wars, the film picks up in the present day with the disparate group working journally as mercenaries against Andy's better judgment. They accept a rescue mission from former CIA agent James Copley. Unfortunately, the mission is revealed to be a trap that exposes their abilities to Stephen Merrick, a ruthless businessman who seeks to exploit them for financial gain. The group's mission to avoid capture is further complicated by the emergence of a new immortal Nile Freeman. Furthermore, in the film's third act, it's revealed that Andy has lost her powers. Despite this, Andy remains resolved to defeat Merrick and rescue her captured friend. Similarly, Niles overcomes her hesitation to leave her known world behind and cements her position on the team by fighting alongside Andy. They are joined by Copley and Booker, both of whom seek to stone for their past betrayals. Emerging victorious and once again free of persecution, the team shift into a new status quo with a renewed sense of purpose. However, with the final setting in the tale revealing the return of a long lost figure from Andy's past, several questions remain for a potential sequel. How and why Andy loses her immortality. Midway through the old guard, Andy realized that a stab wound she had suffered was not healing. The fact that she had lost her immortality was hammered home when she was shot by Booker. Though he was betraying the team, he still believed that she would merely heal when she didn't. Copley questioned how she had lost her power. The film doesn't offer an answer to that question. It's only stated that immortals lost their power as randomly as they get it. This is not determined by age, the numbers of immortals in the world, the number of injuries accumulated, or anything else. The characters believe that they have a set time and it's just a matter of getting to that moment. Rukta created the original comic with no desire to delve into how it all works, but rather to deal with the emotional fallout and turmoil immortality provokes. As such, how Andy lost her power will likely not be explored, bearing the potential that a looming enemy will have found a way to switch the ability of in the word of the film adaptation. The why of it all, however, can easily be discovered in the theme of the film. When the film picks up and expresses that she is tired of life and believes that the world is beyond help. In short, Andy had lost her faith in both humanity and her mission. By being rendered mortal, however, once she again gets a taste of how precious life actually is, as the character states, life means nothing if it is not worth living. By losing her power to live forever, Andy rediscovers her will to live. Furthermore, she resolves to live to the fullest, knowing it now to be finite. That shift in attitude is only further combated by the new knowledge of how her actions have helped, having been immersed in the battle themselves and then moved on. Andy had never been privy to the bigger picture. She is ultimately introduced to that by Copley, who reveal how each person she saved led in return to a monumental benefits of humanity. Though the true source of the team's mortality will not be fully revealed, it remains clear that there is a higher power at work and an element of destiny at play. As such, Andy losing her immortality is likely part of this destiny or necessary development to get her to where she needs to go next. That fact is made all the more apparent in the scene with the chemist, during which Andy is treated with kindness and compassion. Her new vulnerable state directly led her to a moment that further reminded her of the good that humanity can be capable of. In turn, she once again vowed to fight on their behalf. The old guard's new team and Booker's exile. Following the death of Merrick and the defeat of his forces, the group finally received the freedom to resist. Though Booker had been brought along on the operation to save their friends, this betrayal of the team didn't been forgotten. Equally, except for Na's willingness to let it go with an apology, it had not been forgiven. Ordinarily, Andy would have executed him. However, since Booker was immortal, the team instead wanted to exile him for 100 years. Though immortals never know when they will be rendered mortal again. It's expected that Booker will easily live until that time, being a mere few centuries old compared to the others. Given that Andy is no longer immortal, however, she and Booker parted ways, believing it to be the last time they will see each other. Nile herself adopted to stay with the team and effectively take over his spot. Thought she spent the film wanting to return to her family and her old life. That all changed in the old God's third act. Seeing firsthand the sign of a higher power for Kenta, the Immortals' action, she committed herself to join them. To that end, they will also be joined by Copley. He will serve as something of the group's handle as they more fully become an active, independent Black Ops team. Therefore, going into a possible sequel, the team will be comprised of Andy, Joy, Nikki, Nile, and Copley. However, given the credit scene, it's likely that Booker will return to the fold for sooner than the exile dictated, or end up working against them again. If Queenie Time Underwater has turned her evil, there is also the possibility that even further immortals will emerge in future films. The Copley really switched sides. Copley's backstory was more extensively fleshed out on the screen, while his comic book counterpart's betrayal was merely driven by a paycheck. Ejiofor's adoration is infinitely more tragic. Having lost his wife to ALS, his grief pushed him to try and help free humanity of disease and spare people having to go through what he did. In pursuit of that goal, he helped to return the immortals over to Merrick. However, it became clear to Copley that Merrick's sins were not anywhere near as altruistic as his own, but merely driven by potential profits. He also witnesses firsthand the immortal nature of the doctors conducting the test on Joe and Nikki and the outright sadism of Merrick when he stabbed them for personal enjoyment. By this time, Copley had already accumulated a wealth of evidence regarding the good that Andy and her team had accomplished. He stated that the good part from the group's action had grown exponentially over the centuries. Thought he had attempted to speed things up by having the immortal facilities used to aid humanity. He reaffirmed that there was a higher pattern to their journeys. Furthermore, he was impacted by the fact that Andy had lost her powers but still survives to do the right heroic thing. He was moved by the fact that Andy would still fight and put herself on the line for humanity, even as a mortal. As a result, it no doubt became a choice of how he could better honor his wife's memory and similarly help the world. Under those terms, helping Andy and her group was a decision that best fits with Copley morals. Equally, it was the truest way to redeem herself for his initial betrayal. How Queen escapes and what her plan is. In one of the old guard's most harrowing moments, the backstory of Queen was revealed to have culminated in a fate worse than death. After spending centuries together, Queen and Andromache were captured and tied as witches. They were pulled together in several ways but kept coming back. Though the pair initially believed they were to be burned at the stake next, as much crucial fate awaited Queenie when the door of their cell was opened. Greeted by the sight of the medieval torture device known as an iron meter, the ageless warrior was locked inside and thrown into the sea. There, she was doomed to drown over and over again. Why Andy did not suffer a similar fate is unclear, but she revealed that she escaped soon after. Despite Andy's best efforts, she was never able to recover her lost companion. The end of the film revealed, however, that Queenie was actually free of her hellish prison and was now pursuing an agenda for her own. The timeline of Queen Freedom is purposefully hazy. When Nile first emerged as an immortal, she had dreamed of the others, with them having similar ones of her, and he states that the dreams signal a new mortal and that they need to find each other. Niles mentioned Queen having been a part of her dream, that she could see her still locked in her coffin and feel the madness that had ravaged the fallen warrior as a result. As such, unless the vision was more metaphorical than the others, Queen was still trapped for most of the film's events. However, her casually drinking water implies she has long moved past any lingering feelings of trauma the liquid could unrestably provoke. Equally unclear is just how Queen escaped her fate. Though the comics could have provided an insight into that fact, the film made several changes to the character. Firstly, the character was initially Japanese and named Noriko when NGO was cast. However, the character was made Vietnamese and the name changed accordingly.